I'm sure you'll have a chance to bog yourself down in detail later if you want to. But I want to take this question from Charles Hudson, please.
How can Britain face up to international challenges like Russian intervention in Crimea without the political weight which comes from being part of the European Union?
So political weight coming from the European Union. Nigel Farage.
By not becoming a political union with an expansionist foreign policy, with an aim to militarise as quickly as they can. Indeed, Baroness Cathy Ashton, the British Commissioner, is pushing very hard for a European Air Force and for a series of drones. And if you actually look at what's happened with the Ukraine, we've had a message that's been sent out now for 10 years, and this is not just the EU. Indeed, David Cameron, Nick Clegg, and I'm afraid Ed Miliband too, have all been saying to the Ukraine, look, why don't you come and join the European Union? While you're at it, why don't you join NATO too? And this is something that has been seen by Putin to be a deeply provocative act. We have given false hope to those Western Ukrainians. And did you see them with their EU flags and their banners? They actually toppled a democratically elected leader. Yes, I know Ukraine's corrupt. I know he wasn't perfect, but they toppled a leader. And I do not want to be part of an emerging expansionist EU foreign policy. I think it'll be a danger to peace.
Nick Clegg.
Well, I have to say, listening to that, it seems to me if I'm the leader of the party of in, Nigel Farage is the leader of Putin. And it's just extraordinary that his loathing of the European Union is so all-consuming that he is now seeking to justify and defend the actions of a man, Vladimir Putin, who, Ukraine is one thing. Look what's happening in Syria. He is the only man on the planet who, with one telephone call to President Assad, the most brutal dictator in the world, could actually help bring the participants to that awful, awful conflict to the negotiating table. There are 200 people dying in Syria, being mowed down in Syria, being killed in Syria every single day, and Nigel Farage says he admires the way that Vladimir Putin has played, as if it's a game, the terrible humanitarian catastrophe in Syria. He admires how Vladimir Putin has behaved there. That is why I think Nigel Farage's position is absolutely indefensible.
Well, Nick, you, as Deputy Prime Minister, were happy to go and bomb Libya. You did that, and 3.5 years on, the situation in Libya is worse than it was. You were absolutely hell-bent on getting involved militarily in the war in Syria. And I personally am delighted we didn't go to war in Syria, and we're not going to get involved, I hope, in military conflict in the Ukraine. The British people have had enough of endless foreign military interventions. The situation in the Ukraine, in Syria, in Libya, these aren't simple black and white issues. And just to assume that if you support the rebels, you're supporting the good guys, frankly, flies in the face of history, and we should not be intervening. And I don't admire Putin. What I said was he'd outwitted and outclassed you all over Syria. I also said I didn't like him as a human being, and I wouldn't want to live in Russia. But what I want us to do, let's not meddle. Let's not meddle.
Hang on, just before you go on, you did actually say you admired him.
As an operator,
the
not as a human
question was, which current world leader do you most admire? As an operator, I would say Putin.
Yes, and I then went on to say, David, that as a human being and with what he was doing imprisoning journalists, I did not support the man.
Can you just address Nick Clegg's point about Putin could have made one telephone call to Assad and that would have stopped?
Well, I think if Putin had not pointed out that the use of sarin gas had not necessarily come from the Assad regime, if he hadn't done that, I suspect the backbench rebels would not have defeated you, Nick, in stopping us from going. So you wanted us to go to war again. I'm pleased that your backbenchers voted against you, and Putin, I don't like the man, but he contributed to that debate.
Nick Clegg, your turn.
Listen, President Assad denied that chemical weapons existed. It now transpires that he had the largest stockpile of these abominable weapons anywhere on the planet. Now, let's be quite clear what Nigel Farage said. He said about Putin, the way he played the whole Syria thing, brilliant, as if it's a game. This isn't some sort of pub bar sort of discussion. This is a serious issue about how we stop the slaughter, the displacement of millions of people, women and children being sexually abused, terrible violence on an unimaginable scale, and all that Nigel Farage can say, all he can say is he's played it brilliantly. This is an issue where, quite rightly, we in Britain because we see this devastating humanitarian crisis on our television screens, we want to work with others to do something about it. Nigel Farage doesn't want to work with the Americans, he doesn't want to work with the rest of Europe, he only wants to side with Vladimir Putin, who's the only man, as I say, with one telephone call, who could bring this bloody conflict to an end.
So, Nick Clegg, Nick Clegg, can you come back to the question that Charles Hudson asked then? In what sense do we have political weight from being part of the European Union? And to what success in the Ukraine or Syria do you point that justifies it?
Look, we are part, in the European Union, Charles asked the question, of what is the world's largest economy, right? 500 million people, shoppers, who can buy our goods, who can buy our services. But they don't only buy our goods and services, and contrary to what you just heard from Nigel Farage, we export 50% of the things we produce to the European Union. They only export 8% to us. But crucially, they also buy and sell as an economic superpower in this part of the world from Ukraine, from Russia, from the Middle East, from other parts of many countries in our neck of the woods. So we have huge economic clout, which of course Vladimir Putin, which of course people in the Middle East will listen to. We don't have that if we were simply to isolate ourselves and cut ourselves off from our own European neighbours.
Look, I think you misunderstand. The whole point of this debate is 40 years on. 40 years ago, it was a common market. Now it's a European Union that wants an air force, an army, a navy, and wants to militarily intervene. Indeed, one of your own senior MEPs wanted missile strikes to be launched against Syria until, you were beaten in the House of Commons. This country, Nick, has had enough of getting involved in endless foreign wars.
But these are dangerous.
Whether it's you doing it or anybody else doing it, and there is no evidence. Hang on. There is no evidence that our military intervention in these countries is making life better. As I say, with you as Deputy Prime Minister,
that's not the question.
With you as Deputy Prime Minister, we bombed Libya, and it's worse now than it was then. And the answer to Charles's question is, I don't want to be part of a European foreign policy.
The problem, but this is a dangerous fantasy. The idea that there's going to be a European Air Force, a European army, it is simply not true. The problem with people like Nigel Farage is they swing at windmills. They see conspiracies everywhere. I wouldn't be surprised if Nigel Farage soon tells us that the moon landing was a fake, that Barack Obama isn't American, that Elvis isn't dead. It is not going to happen.
Why do you deny your union?
He claimed last week that 485 million people were going to vacate the whole of the rest of the European continent and turn up in Britain, leaving no human habitation left in the rest of Europe. It's as silly as me saying that 5 million people living in Scotland might all move to Orpington next Tuesday. It isn't going to happen.
Nigel Farage.
Nick, when are you going to start confronting a few simple truths and stop twisting the facts the way you did last week and you're doing this week? You're doing it again. You're saying that I said 485 million people would come to Britain. I didn't. I said they were able to. You came up with the most twisted trade figure I've ever heard. And last week you even said, you tried to tell the British people that only 7% of our national laws emanate in the European Union.
That is true.
I thought you believed in the European project. You and I both know that the whole point of the Constitution, which you supported, was to make the European Union an economic and a military superpower.
No.
And now you deny the fact they're trying to build a European Air Force.
It is a dangerous fantasy.
It's about, well, you said, you keep using this word fantasy.
Well, it is a fantasy.
Why are you denying? I thought you were here to defend the European Union. They want an army, navy, and air force.
I also want to explain the truth and the reality.
But it's not true,
this fantasy world, which you keep talking about, which simply doesn't exist. It's saying that, I only said 485 people are entitled to move here. It's like me saying, well, 5 million Scottish people are entitled to move to Orpington. It's not going to happen.
OK, we've got to move on. Can I just ask you one point of something you said a moment ago? I just want to clarify what you said, if that's the right way to put it. You said that a Democrat in Ukraine was overthrown, suggesting that you weren't on the side of the demonstrations against Yanukovych. What was your view about the shooting by snipers of the demonstrators?
Look,
I don't want to...
David, my whole point is that the situation in these countries is deeply complex. There is no evidence that our intervening will make them better. I don't want us to get involved. It's not our business. We can't make it better. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Now, let's go on.